Hi, everyone. Okay, so Kerry Cassidy is no ordinary speaker. She's a dynamic broadcaster, a trailblazing documentary filmmaker, and an intrepid investigative reporter. Her illustrious career has left an indelible mark on the world of journalism and storytelling. Kerry is renowned for pioneering the Camelot guerilla interview style, a method that skillfully captures the raw interpersonal drama between the interviewer and interviewee. Through her unique approach, she empowers viewers to distinguish between the truth, half-truths, and lies, leading them on a quest for an unvarnished reality. What truly sets Kerry apart is her profound intuition and remote viewing abilities, which she has honed over the years of delving into esoteric knowledge and immersing herself in the Eastern philosophy. Her insights and perspectives are unparalleled, offering a fresh and enlightening take on the subjects that she explores. So, Kerry, welcome to CC. It's an absolute honour to have you here. You're in good company. You can go hard with us. We're up there with you. So I hand over to you. The floor is yours.
Okay, great. So you can hear me okay?
We can.
Thank you so much. This is a lot of fun. I don't usually do this kind of a gathering, and it's funny to see all your faces. It's actually very cool because it's nice to see your audience. I don't always see my audience, obviously, when I'm online. I actually have a piece of news right away to share with you that came in today, and I want to make sure that I say it correctly here. So I'm not introducing myself any further and thank you for the lovely introduction. That was very sweet of you. I have been doing this for close to it's 19 years actually. So it's quite a long time, and what do I don't know if there's anybody who one of the things I want to do, and I don't know if it's even possible to do it, but I'll throw it out there and you guys can decide. Because I have so much stuff I can pick and choose from, I want to make sure, I'm going to have a longer question and answer session because I want to make sure I'm going in the direction that you guys want to go, and not necessarily going over old stuff that you've already heard me say before. So that's a little difficult. All right. So for me to know. And so I hope when we get to the Q&A, you guys can kind of guide me in that way and make sure that we go into unexplored or relatively unexplored territory. So now the new information that I just got is this. I have a source who said that he has a nephew in the military, and he says that in the next few days that Biden has called up 2 military divisions over this weekend. So we are supposedly going to see who's in control. This is the person saying it, not me. Okay. And I asked him to go where, and he said he didn't know, but they were told to be prepared to move out this weekend. Now I have another piece of information to complement that, which, and again, we don't know. I think you all are in Australia. I love Australia, by the way. And I like Australians very much as well. I've been there a few times. I have a very close friend there and other, colleagues and things. And I just think it's quite a marvelous country, really. It's quite extraordinary. Although I'm really afraid of your sort of bugs and things. But other than that, it's all wonderful. So what they're saying is really, for United States, we are kind of on the verge of what you might say is a civil war and or a revolutionary war, or a different kind of revolution that may not even include war. We think of it as a war. It's kind of a silent war behind the scenes, or a soft war, or whatever you want to call that. But this piece of information is important because it's coming from a source who has got a direct connection to the military through the nephew. He also has some other relatives in the military. and saying that this is happening this weekend. Now, at the same time, I have some people who have contacted me loosely and are headed down to the border. Now, I don't know why they're headed down to the border right now, as opposed to other times. And I have had some hothead friends in the military who have told me they wanted to go down there. I think they were dissuaded. I don't know, but this was actually around, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. So things may be heating up in America. I guess everyone knows that Trump was on trial today, lost a case. He owes this woman, Jean Carroll, $83 million for accosting her supposedly in a dressing room. You might have heard the story. And this, I guess, was many years ago. He claims he doesn't even know her and doesn't remember her. Obviously, she doesn't look now like she did back then. I guess she was quite a bit younger. My understanding, okay, this is what seems to be happening, is that we've got more than one Trump. So let's look at that a little bit and see that when you have doubles and you're constantly using them to do certain things, and especially when your life is in danger, no matter what you do. And in Trump's case, this has absolutely been the case. And so when you are not, you think about it this way, are you responsible for what your double does as a president? And presidents always have doubles, as you may know. So this is a dilemma, because we don't know if the real Trump is guilty of this or a double. And there has been some rumblings over time saying that possibly one of the doubles maybe went a little bit off the radar, or off the, is a saying, off the reservation, so to speak. Now, I don't know that's true. I'm just relating that. As a journalist and investigator, and after doing this for so many years and talking to so many people, which at this point it's around, it's definitely 1,500, it could be 2,000 interviews. And most of all my interviews are available, and most of them are free, a good half. So 1,000, at least 1,000, maybe more. So it's worth noting that even though we became subscription based when I was deleted off YouTube, and I think it was March 2021, we went to a subscription based, which is $3 a month. What I say is less than the price of a latte if you subscribe for a year. But $3 a month is, for some people it's easy, for some people it's hard. Obviously, there's a huge gamut out there. But I just want people to know that even lately, because we're in the state we're in, I haven't been marking things, what you call, to go behind the membership wall as much. So a lot of the interviews are staying on Rumble, they're staying on Facebook, where I broadcast first, a lot of my shows live, and so on. So if you're a person who has low income and you want to watch my stuff, there's a huge amount now, even more than ever, that is free. So just want to say that. So, okay, so we're looking at a situation where every day, I guess all of you feel this way, perhaps. I know I do. And, I've tried to get a hold of Ricardo Bossi, because he's an Australian who recently said that the Australians owe a huge debt to the White Hats. And I was very happy to hear that, because I'm sure there are other people and countries and so on that may also owe them a debt, but no one has come forward other than him to say this. And I have people, even like my good friend Sean David Morton, who's recovering from cancer, hopefully. He actually is in denial that the White Hats even exist. Now, I don't know if it's an act or if he really thinks that way, because Sean is quite a character if you ever saw my interviews with him. But nonetheless, he is a good old friend, and it is appalling to me that he doesn't realize that there really is this organization which is made up of everyone around the country, not the country, but the world, who has decided to join the White Hats and been allowed in. And they're very, you sign a security oath. So they run themselves like a military operation. And I think that's important to know. And I can go on quite extensively about the White Hats, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to assume you guys know about that. I know that, Simon Parks is a good friend, as is his wife, Rebecca. And you guys are in Connecting Consciousness, and that's all great. And, I've known them for years. And Simon speaks at my Wake and Aware in England every year. So we always see each other at least once a year. And a lot of times I see him when I go back over Christmas, because I have a good friend that I stay with over that holiday time. Both my parents have passed on. So I do have sisters, but my family's kind of extended, whatever. So what I'm trying to say here is that we're in a very strange time on planet Earth. And I just did this interview with Jay Widener and Jean-Claude, who was the host, and myself. And it just happened yesterday. And then the day before that, I had just done what I haven't done in a really long time, which is basically me by myself going over a bunch of data that I feel that no one out there is talking about. And if they are, I haven't heard them. They're not on sort of in the mainstream or the main part of the alternative sector. And I'd like to highlight some of those things today with you. And I realize that it's very difficult. I do 3 interviews a week at least, sometimes more. And sometimes I'm interviewed and sometimes I interview someone else. So it's hard to say what's going to happen. And it's been, I thought a few years ago I was going to kind of kick back and that things were not going to be, what's left to do kind of thing. Because I have really gone down the rabbit hole an incredible amount. But to my surprise, I started connecting the dots, just because that's what I do anyway, as a journalist and writing these articles and whatnot. And then more and more people wanted me to talk about this kind of thing. So I really, I'm more of an analyst, I think you might say, than a lot of my colleagues who will tell you information, but they won't necessarily link it all together, give you a narrative through line and analyze it at the same time. So I do that. Now, my background, for those that most of you probably know, is in Hollywood, actually. So I spent 19 years in Hollywood working even for the top film companies and all of that, even doing development, etc. So, and I was writing screenplays as well in the early days. And so my focus, the way I look at things as a journalist, and I'm a trained journalist, unlike most of the people that are out there, colleagues out there are not trained journalists, strangely. They became bloggers and started talking to people. And I'm not saying they're not good at it. It's just different when you've been trained and you have certain, protocols you follow, certain kind of almost rules and regulations. So there's a certain amount of what I demand from myself, having to do with objectivity, having to do with telling, the truth and nothing but the truth sort of thing, and not going off too much on a tangent, not having my prejudices come in as best I can. I'm not perfect, but if you can imagine. So this is all entering into, and we'll enter into the Q&A when you ask me. Now I'm also, I was a political activist in college, and I was also trained, as I say, in journalism in college. So I was actually interviewing some radical people, because I come from California, and I went to Sonoma State University, in case you're familiar with that. That's in Northern California, and it's actually known, or was known back at the time when I was there, as a radical college, a radical university. And so I was sort of steeped in that world, and I studied all kinds of political lines of thought. And so I'm a little different in that regard as well. I have this background that makes me analyze. For example, are the white hats actually good guys? Are they doing the right thing? And then I have this weird spiritual side that has to do with my immersion into basically Eastern philosophy. I studied Zen Buddhism, studied, I've traveled in India. I've traveled all over the world, really. But I also studied things like the Tarot thoroughly, the Crowley Tarot, by the way. And each Tarot is different if you know Tarot. And I mean, not just a little. I studied astrology quite deeply. I studied the I Ching quite deeply. This is all when I was younger. Okay. So these things inform my everyday way of looking at the world. And therefore, I question everything. And I also grew up in a family where we didn't even have a Bible in the house. Not because my parents were, anti-Christian. In essence, they thought they were Christian, but my father refused to go to church. He had decided that the church was, I guess, infiltrated or whatever, which he was right. And my mother studied psychology at Stanford at a time when women didn't necessarily do that as much. And she, so she looked at the world in a different way than most of her peers, I guess you would say. And she took me around when I was 12 to all different religious orders and churches and Buddhist temples, et cetera, because she decided by the time I reached 12, and we had 4 kids altogether, my family, that we needed to be sort of educated spiritually about religion. So we ended up at the Unitarian Church and only lasted a few months there, but I was there long enough to be exposed to Akhenaten and Nefertiti that I had a very strong connection with. And since what has happened since then is that I lead tours of Egypt, in case you don't know that. So just trying to give you a really, so that you understand where I'm coming from, more so than I normally do when I just talk. So recently, I had been watching Pine Gap, I guess it's called, the series, and being Australian, you know about that. And let me say, I have some secret witnesses that are Australian. Okay, so I tend to hear some things about your country more so than maybe the average person. And I have investigated some of that stuff as well. And so when I talk about this series, I was really focusing on my last talk on this idea of advanced knowledge, having to do with AI and having to do with surveillance. And I have come to the conclusion, as you would, I can't, is there a way, can I say, because I think there's like 1,000 or more people here. So I can't get a show of hands to say how many people saw my recent sort of video blog, whatever you want to call it, that I put on Rumble. But at any rate, so please forgive me if you've seen it, but if you haven't seen it, this will maybe encourage you to see it. Because what I'm doing is connecting the dots, and I am trying to look at the situation in our planet right now and understanding that we are being used, abused, and surveilled to the nth degree. And it seems that people still don't realize what that means. And what I'm trying to convey here is this idea that what being surveilled means and how they take it and they connect it all together to a narrative through line means that they are able to come to a conclusion. They're also using like Minority Report, precogs, and remote viewers. Okay, as you can appreciate, the deep state uses it and the white hats use these. Okay, so when we look at it, I see it as sort of a game board. So in terms of the game, they're both getting advanced knowledge, but we, the humans, most of the humans around Earth, are not necessarily, unless you're psychic, unless you're a remote viewer, unless you've sort of honed your abilities in this way. you're going to be in the dark as to what's going to happen from one day to the next. And if you're prey, as I call it, and this is my point of view, that we are being invaded by reptilian species that are Draco, reptilians, and greys. They're all related. And they are also, it's beginning to appear, they are controlled by AI. Now, recently, I also talk about, and I talked about on this blog I did, the fact that we have also, I have been told, even going back, God, I don't even know, 15 years maybe or so, that this planet is also run by one AI, okay, that is surveilling all of us on top of it. And then there's the network of nanosatellites that I talk about. Anthony Sanchez, this software sort of executive who got contacted by what's called Lockheed Martin, one of the defense contractors, and that a number of those people went on the run and contacted him because I guess they felt he would understand that they had been building these artificially intelligent nanosatellites. And nano means you can't see it with the naked eye, for one thing. So this is key. And nobody knows about this or talks about it except me. But Anthony Sanchez did go on the circuit and start talking about it. It's called Project Leonid. And so we're talking about a network of satellites long before Elon Musk came to the fore with his network. Okay. So these, basically, he did an interview with me, Anthony Sanchez, and we were both told that his family would be killed if I released that interview. Now, he had been out on the circuit talking about this network of nanosatellites, Project Leonid, and he was about to write a book about it when he got this warning. And the way they warned him was he came down to Southern California. He spent all day being interviewed with, by me. And this was just a one-on-one with a couple other people watching. So it's very strange how they knew all of it, but they did. And then he drove home to Northern California. He put his car in the garage as normal, locked it up, rolled up the windows, so-and-so. And then he went to sleep. And we woke up in the morning, went out to his garage, and there was a message in the inside of his car window. And it basically told him that if he, revealed anything or the interview was released, that his family would be killed, he and his family. Now, I also received a phone call that morning, and I was told the same message, that if I released this interview, et cetera, and that I should call Anthony and reiterate it. So I did. This is the kind of thing we're looking at, okay? We're looking at a situation where we have a military industrial complex, we have the Illuminati, we have these levels of control over us, okay? And that's coming from your governments, but also much more the secret government of your governments and the unseen government, which is occupying the underground bases, underground cities, and also going off planet. Now, I don't know where we are in time. I tend to just talk on and on. So I don't know where we are in time. I am happy to let this be the introduction and take questions, or I can continue to talk. So maybe you guys want to decide among you. I don't know.
Kerry, if you feel so moved to go ahead and continue talking, it's fine. We do have lots of questions, but I'm certain as you continue talking, people will come with more. Most people in the audience are saying, please continue talking.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. So this is the thing. This is what I realize everyone has their different religious beliefs and spirituality and religion are two different things. I guess you know that. And some people have both, as part of their life and so on and so forth. These are all understandable. But I again, because I grew up in a different kind of household, and because I went out at the age of around 12 and bought a Bible and read it. So I decided that I wanted to see what it was all about. And so I looked at the Bible completely differently from what I can tell after all these years than people who had been steeped in it since they were little children and told to do certain things and so on and so forth, like kneel down and pray and drink the blood of Christ and all this kind of thing. So I never had any of that, and it gave me a different point of view. And but I was a very spiritual child, and I was a very spiritual adult as well. And my spirituality has guided me much more so than anything else. And I will say that I don't listen. I know this sounds crazy because I'm a person who listens to people all night and all day, especially even before I started talking. For a long time, I simply asked the questions and showed people, in front of the camera. And I actually was told by a famous broadcaster that, hey, you need to be in the shot with the person. And I don't know why, but it hadn't occurred to me up until then, even though I was trained as an actress when I was younger. I just, I was very intent on getting the story, doing this guerrilla filmmaking thing, putting the camera in front of, it was a documentary style. But eventually I did come on camera and so with all of this. So what I'm saying here is that I come at this from a spiritual point of view. That's my main point of view. And I got involved with Ashiana Dean and what is called the Guardian races at a certain point. And this is before Camelot, believe it or not, which means this is like more than 19, 20 years ago, okay, where I stumbled on Ashiana Dean's website, and I already knew psychically that it was absolutely what I needed to investigate. And I vowed I would interview her. Way back in the day, when I wanted to interview her, my former partner at the very early days of Camelot, who really only lasted about 2.5 years of these 19, Bill Ryan, didn't want or like or have any interest in Ashiana Dean and the Guardian races. And so we started to disagree on who to interview. And that was part of the reason we split up. There were other reasons. Certain people in his life were trying to tell him, get rid of her. You can do a much better job. You take over and you be the spokesperson, and so on and so forth. Now, he would chip in every once in a while on interviews, but he was kind of the guy behind the scenes that was actually, he initially had to do with writing articles and building our website and communicating with the, because we hit the ground running and were extremely popular right away because we traveled the world with a consumer grade camcorder interviewing people, and which that wasn't done back in those days like that. But anyway, so when I approach these things, I am extremely spiritually minded, and I want to make sure, for example, that the white hats don't lose their souls in the process of the battle and the war to win back our world. And so that is also part of the decision-making process I go through, and why I've made certain decisions I have, and that might maybe give you a clue as to why I make, I decide I do certain things that are kind of, I guess, not the norm, and why I say the things I do, and so on and so forth. So I am quite psychic. I have become more psychic kind of the older I got, because at one point in my early 20s, I connected all my chakras. I had massive Kundalini awakenings, and I still go through those samadhi experiences even now. So that was like, actually, I have to say, a brilliant move on my part, but I didn't know it at the time. I simply was motivated. I don't know why. I just, at the age of 18, I'd read Siddhartha, and I'd studied some, spiritual texts and whatnot. And I just decided, well, I'll become enlightened. That's the thing to do. Obviously, that's what we're here for. So I started when I was quite young, and it was a good decision, and it stuck with me. And I was in a good physical condition, because when you're young, that's the best time to activate Kundalini, if you know anything about it. As you get older, it becomes much more difficult, and it does give you a lot of health benefits, which I have. I've actually been attacked and had all kinds of crazy things happen to me. I've had death threats, and these kinds of attacks do continue, so on and so forth. So I don't know. I think what I really want to do, if I convey anything today to you, is to say that if you look at this as a game and you look at it as a soul who has come into this game, and this is just you might say a metaphor. It doesn't mean it's literally a game, although it could be. What I would say about it is this: look at yourself as having a decision to make. You entered a game in which you were going to be told that, number one, you're going to forget who you are. And what your mission is to remember who you are. And then at the same time, you're going to have a mission to, in essence, save the world from these incredibly devious, diabolical characters who have completely taken over this planet, because that's actually the case. Our planet Earth has been taken over eons ago, before you ever got here, at least in this body. Although I believe in reincarnation, and I have reincarnational memories of my own. So I kind of know who I was. I know mistakes I made in the past that I've rectified now. So I have a consciousness about this path I'm on. And I do understand that even when things look, super dark, that I, as a soul, chose to be here, chose to come in, chose to have these challenges to myself as a soul. And, I intend to win, I guess you might say, for myself at least. And hopefully for the rest of the world as well, to fight the good fight, and so on and so forth. So when you have this perspective, it can motivate you, as opposed to just thinking, landing here on the planet and thinking, oh, I don't know what the fuck to do with myself. Who am I, and why should I say anything, and all this kind of stuff. But it can inform you. The more you know, the more you learn, the more you tap into your own inner guidance and your connection with external beings as well, both in body, whether they be on other planets, or like entities, or what we call angels or demons, or ever all this kind of thing, is that you can educate yourself and you can interact with these different levels. And I don't draw these partitions as much in certain areas as, let's say, religious people do. And I take objection to some of the things that they say and do that would bar people, whether they be men or women, to sort of exploring psychic abilities, etc., and saying that you're not part of God or whatever. If you do that, you're part of Satan and all this kind of thing. So I'm very open with my the way I talk, and I'm not shy about stating my points of view. I guess that's obvious to everyone, but just saying. So in case there's some newbies here, because I don't know, what we're composed of here, this whole group. So I'm going to break off here, and I'm more than happy to answer questions. And I don't think that I'll find anything that you ask me to be offensive, but just understand that I'll be as honest as I can. And so that if I feel you can handle the truth. Okay, that's one of the key things that I'm about. Where Jack Nicholson said, you can't handle the truth. Well, I think the opposite. And this is something I'm constantly trying to harp on with the white hats behind the scenes, to get them to be more honest and open with people than they are. So anyone's
Thank you, Kerry. What we'll do now is Joe and I will field the questions to you, and you can answer them as you feel fit to. Some of them might be multi-parted because we've tried to combine similar questions for you. But let me start it off with the first question that came in. It says, have you researched or had info from others concerning the idea that there will be a worldwide ascension, such as the solar flash concept? And if so, what's your opinion on this?
Okay. My opinion is that we are ascending now, that it is a process, not a destination. So when you look at it like that, it's important to realize that you're going through this experience, and what this experience is, the sort of the trail is towards ascension. So, but ascension is a strange concept, and there's a lot of what I call spiritual materialists out there, and they want brownie points for winning, or for getting something, on a spiritual level, for attaining a certain ability or whatever it happens to be. And this is a very dangerous occupation, being a spiritual materialist. And it's very close to being a Satanist, to be honest. So I think there's a fine line. And as it happens, a lot of, not just woke people, but a lot of woke people, whether they know it or not, are being used by the dark side. And in essence, their unknowingness is no excuse. They end up having responsibility for their actions. So this, whether there's a solar flash, I have witness testimony going back probably, 19 years, when we were told some of the things that are happening now would be happening in the future. Now, the timeline is quite different than we were originally told. A lot of people focused back in the early days of Camelot on 2012, saying that's when the big thing was going to happen. Well, none of that stuff really happened in 2012. A couple things did, but not that. So we are in another one of those kind of junctures where a lot of predictions are coming forward. And for those of you who may remember, I have recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, interviewed a physicist called Richard Allen Miller, who openly says he works for Navy intelligence, and he does. And I've known him now for years, and I've interviewed him dozens of times in person as well with the camera. And he came forward, I think this was a year or two ago, and told me that he had been told to come forward and say there was a prediction. And we're now getting really close to this date that he predicted something would happen. But after kind of like almost, 6 months or a year later, he came to me and said, well, I think it's going to be 2025 instead of 2024. I kind of tend not to trust that very much, because in 2020, when he predicted what he predicted, and I'll explain what that is, in 2024, he said it's going to be end of March, beginning of April, 2024. And he said he had gotten what is called a 3 sigma certainty that what he was seeing was going to happen. And what it was kind of like a Carrington event. It's called the Carrington event. That was not going to be a termination level, extinction level event, but instead would involve some earth changes and was possibly linked to, could be a solar flare, could be an EMP, and, or could be what Ed Dames calls a kill shot from the sun type of thing, which goes back quite a while ago. And I actually met Ed Dames in person and talked with him. I didn't do an interview at the time. And if you go back that far, then that was a whole saga back in the day. So we're approaching a date which Richard Allen Miller, this physicist who does, as I say, work for Navy Intel, they set him up to it, obviously. They wanted him to come on my show. At that point, my website was taken down for 6 days. They destroyed the website. just like has just happened, by the way. So my website has been rebuilt a few times where they absolutely decimate the thing and it has to be put back together. We have copies and things like that, but we have to change servers, they destroy our server and so on and so forth. So in this case, that's what happened to me. So you could say, well, maybe that's an indication that it's true, that if they attack you because you say something or your witness says something, then there could be reason to believe that there may be some truth there. I have had dreams of the future, and I am a precog, and I have seen, for example, I dreamed at least 6 years ago, maybe more, that the Chinese would be invading our southern border, troops of Chinese. And it turned out to happen. It's now happening, and it's been happening for the past year or two. And this is even in the mainstream press. And at the time I had the dream vision, I call dream visions really, I thought that was crazy. Chinese aren't coming in our border, like that's not going to happen. And I actually saw them go into Denver, Colorado. And at the time that I had this dream, which was a really intense dream, I had gone to Gaia TV. I had been interviewed over there, and I had had talks with the head of Gaia. And then I was going to fly out, but I had to stay overnight at the airport because my flight was leaving super early in the morning. So I was sleeping at the airport, the Denver airport, like in an airport hotel right in that area. So that may have contributed to why I had the particular dream I had, but it was so real that when I woke up, I didn't even know where I was. And I thought that we had been invaded by China, by Chinese troops. And I was actually sick to my stomach over it. So for what it's worth, I do have these kind of dream visions, and they are coming true. I just recently talked about this. I'm not going to repeat it here because it'll take too much time. But the bottom line is that I had a recent dream come true that's coming true now, where Trump is saying when he goes in office, there's going to be a mass exodus of all the immigrants that have come in, which is in the millions now. Well, I saw that before the 2020 election in a very intense dream, when the Schumann resonance was kind of off the charts in April of 2020. So all I'm saying, I'm not saying all my dreams come true, but I am saying I have seen over the years and had warnings about dreams and certain things. I even got a dream at one point. I was working in New York City that I was going to be fired. And sure enough, I went to work that day and I was fired. So I've had things like that happen, where you can verify, that you might be accurate. Doesn't mean you're always going to be accurate. These things change. So in answer to your question, I hope I've covered that. I'm not a big proponent of some of these people that think, oh, there's an ascension event coming. No, I don't see it like that. I see that we are moving towards ascension as a people on planet Earth. I see that is causing the forces of darkness to want to keep us down even harder. And so I see it's a little like a beach ball, if you push it down in the water. So you push down our resonance, our frequency with these negative events, and then we bounce back, but we bounce back even higher, the way if you push a ball down in the water and it goes up like higher. So that's consciousness, and consciousness is king as far as I'm concerned. So this is what it's all about. And the frequency change is really dismaying and even detrimental to a lot of those on the dark side. So they can't handle it. And number one, they feel that it's kind of like an attracting force. So the force is coming, and expanding. This light from all of us is starting to expand. The more aware we are, that all of the lies start getting exposed and all the truth, and that raises the frequency of all the humans, not just the people talking about it. You understand? So it's great to talk about it. It's great to know that we are kind of part of a wave of humanity that is bringing our whole species into this amazing place. And it doesn't necessarily require that you leave your body either. It may be that humans will get to a certain level of frequency where the light expands around Earth and we will live in a more, I'm not a proponent of the golden age either, but I would say that things will move. Like right now we have it's like a clock or a graph kind of thing. And it's been this way towards the dark. And we're bringing it back to center between light and dark. So we're not getting rid of dark. Okay. I think people that talk about that like that are insane, frankly. As far as I'm concerned, we're bringing it back to center to where it's a fair fight instead of, weighted towards the dark here on planet Earth. And I think that's what we're about. Shock.
I'll make the next. Sorry,
Next
Kerry.
question.
I'll go on. That was a wonderful explanation. And it's like we say here in CC, there's over 120,000 members in CC, and it's like we're anchoring the light in the different parts of the world, because this is like a worldwide, you've got people from all over the world here. I'd like to take the credit all from Australia, but there's others here as well. And we say we're anchoring the light in our little area, in our village, in our town. We're just holding it strong. So that was a great explanation. Thank you. Okay, somebody is asking, what can you say about Antarctica? What do you know about it? I mean, we're fairly au fait with it, but is there any extra things you can tell us about?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, okay. This is my understanding about Antarctica, a few things. First of all, it is a place where we go, a lot of sort of our secret government, whatever, go to have meetings with all planet races because it's the least surveilled area of the planet. That's number one. Number two is that it is a former Nazi base, New Swabenland, and also what's it called? There are different names for it, but basically it was created as a base for the Nazis during the time of Hitler. They started going down there and expanded it, but they were helped by the beings from Aldebaran, who appear to be reptilian humanoid hybrids who came to them and chose that particular race on our planet of Germans who they thought could handle the technology. And I think there probably was also a genetic relationship between the Germans and those from Aldebaran in such a way that they were then sort of more attracted to give them information and to help them as a race. They were told, I mean, this is very extensive, but they were told they could win World War II because they gave them technology like the Foo Fighters and the bell, what's called the bell, the henge, and all of that. Time travel, I mean, just amazing stuff that eventually came over to the United States as part of our secret space program. Also went to Russia. The Germans are, the British are very involved with anything that comes to the United States. So we're kind of partners in a funny way on everything. And so Antarctica is also a place where there's seams. Now, this is a very strange thing. I don't know which race of beings from off planet are running Antarctica. I have theories, but it's never been made clear. But there are some very weird anomalies going on with regard to Antarctica, needless to say. And from the investigations I've done over the years, and we've had actually some whistleblowers, we even had a whistleblower on the run, supposedly, who brought a document from a base in Antarctica. He escaped from that base. People thought he was crazy. He went to Germany. He tried to go to MUFON in Germany and give them the document, but they wouldn't touch it. They were afraid. So someone called us, Camelot, and said, hey, do you guys want to deal with this, sort of whistleblower person who has this document and comes from this, Antarctica base? And of course we said yes. And so we took it on, and we actually did publish the document, although I don't know what's happened to it since then. So I can't exactly explain. But the strange thing is that he had some mental problems. He mixed up words. And so some of the document is kind of hard to decipher. But he was is a brilliant person. And because we brought him on board, we got some information, but he never came on camera, to my knowledge, that I remember. And I think at this point, he pretty much has disappeared again, back into the woodwork, so to speak. But this is the kind of thing going on. So first of all, I always question the name Antarctica and say, well, are we talking about the ant beings? Because there are ant beings off-world, and it's kind of a weird name. And so, it's always bothered me, always. And when something bothers me, I tend to, listen and try to follow it out and all that. So I'm just throwing that out. I still don't have any proof of this. I also can tell you that I've tracked during presidential elections, a very strange thing happens, and it's happened. I think it's even happening right now, but I think John Kerry went down to Antarctica recently. I'm not sure. I know that God, am I going to remember his name? Anyway, this, there have been, every time we have an election, someone goes down to Antarctica. It's almost like to get instructions from someone down there, some group down there that's running the United States in some weird way. It could be the beings from Aldebaran, again, being reptilian humanoid hybrids, or it could be another group. I don't know. It's very hard to get good, hard evidence about Antarctica. Now, one of the things is, however, there's a series of books that were written, and a certain person who wrote these books who did have some very good information about Antarctica, which resonated with me. And if somebody is listening to this and hasn't heard me talk about it before, I can go and try to find the title, and you can, I forget what it's called. But anyway, what it is that it's okay. So at some point, our globe, or whatever you want to call it, the land masses did shift. Okay. And what was Atlantis seems to have shifted down to Antarctica and been hidden under the ice. So what we've got is our secret space program knows that Atlantis is the last time humans and aliens walked freely on surface Earth together. So they're very interested to go down and study the artifacts of this civilization, Atlantis, that are hidden in Antarctica. So that's a big part of why they keep going down there with scientists and going under the ice and all this kind of thing. And I think that is true. And I think it's very compelling. Now, Mu, the continent of Mu, was down in the south. I think you might call it it's off of California, but also south of California in the Pacific. So it's down there. So that was operational also back in those days. So Mu and Atlantis were kind of a little bit operating at the same time. Not exactly, because there was a juxtaposition, but if you understand. So when you look at it, Antarctica, this is what I see. I don't see it as just a superficial thing. It's a very deep thing, has everything to do with Atlantis as far as I'm concerned. There is under the ice. I actually do have a whistleblower behind the scenes who talked about it and has been there. Been there in the more secret ways, not just, some people have managed. Brad, what's his name? Brad Olson. is an explorer who did go to Antarctica, but he only saw what they allow the public to see, so he didn't really see that much. So anyway, that's more or less some of the things I know about Antarctica. I know that Linda Moulton Howe has had a few good whistleblowers talking about Antarctica. But she, how it is. Okay, so each of us, a person can tell you something and you take it in, and you are like a filter. You have a filtering system, and it has to do with how good your filter is. And I'm not saying one thing or another about her as, her abilities, but in the early days of Camelot, she tried to get, sort of destroy us for whatever reason. And, just maybe competition as a journalist. But she also never went down the ET road, the beings from other planets to the degree that we did. Okay. And we hit the ground running with this stuff. I mean, neither me or Bill Ryan had any problem believing or understanding that we have, that we're not here alone on the planet, with the only planet in the universe without, I mean, this is all insane, people that don't know there's other life on other planets, et cetera. It's just, I can't even go there. It's so stupid. But understanding that at the time, Linda had some dealings, I have to say. I'm going to be careful here, but she had some dealings that I know about, and certain other people with certain agents and things. So she was being kind of limited. She was a wonderful investigator, as you know, and a wonderful journalist, don't get me wrong. But her excursions into the area of ET and off-planet beings, she kind of limits herself. She doesn't go to these places. She did investigate cattle mutilations, but she doesn't really, or she didn't for a long time. Now, I think more and more she's more open to the ET visitation and the idea that we're involved with them and so on and so forth. But so the reason I say all this is because since she has whistleblowers about Atlantis, they could bring her information, but she doesn't put two and two together because her mind doesn't want to go there. She has her own limitations in this way. Now, I don't pay attention to her lately, and I don't know if she's changed her philosophy and, opened her mind and so on and so forth. But you have to understand, this is part of what I do. One of the reasons that I got so good at what I do is because for some reason, and this even, this is why I couldn't continue with Bill Ryan, other than he wanted to out some of our whistleblowers, because he thought they lied to him, and we never agreed to do that. But anyway, is because I have a very, very open mind. I will look at stuff. I will consider stuff. And part of the reason I'm like that is because, first of all, when I was a child, I had a huge imagination. I also was abducted by aliens. I've talked about that in the past. I've had all kinds of visitation by aliens, and I just have an open mind. I also know about ghosts and, all of that, and reincarnation and so on and so forth. So I don't have like these partitions in my brain that stop me from exploring and considering, possibilities. And I haven't encouraged my own self to have these prejudices either. I don't feel like I need them. I don't feel like, oh, if I don't believe in this or that, then I'm going to hell, or all these kind of things. I don't, it's just the way my brain works. I'm very, very open to considering. That doesn't mean I jump on board either. I will sit and listen, and I will I interviewed this contactee. His name is Aaron McCullum, years ago. Those who have been with me all these years will know who that is, but he's a dolphin-human hybrid. And while I was interviewing him, and as I met him and everything, his entire life changed because he was in touch with Camelot. Now, this is another dynamic that has gone on, and it goes back to King Arthur's Camelot, believe it or not. And that's a whole story, and it's in my book, and so on and so forth. But the idea here is that when I was interviewing him, I got downloads of the right questions to ask him. And I didn't have any problem understanding or taking on board that he was a dolphin human hybrid, that he was, genetically re-engineered by the military as a sort of a quasi super soldier, if you want to call it that, but not in the traditional sense. So I'm just trying to explain that information is information. How it hits you, how you then sort of put it out to the masses, how whether you limit it, whether you make sure that it fits into your bucket. I have other friends or colleagues, and one in particular who's very well known, and his bucket has everything to do with the return of the golden age, blah blah blah. But because he has this preconceived notion about the future, everything that happens to him, everything that comes to him has to fit into that bucket. And life isn't like that. And information is certainly not like that. So when these are like things that cause for breaks to where you're not going to get the straight story and you're not going to give the straight story. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect in this way, but I am saying my proclivities along these lines is I kind of feel like I came here for the experience and the game of it as much as, to have a good outcome. I'm not like, oh, we have to have a good outcome no matter what. I actually understand the role of the light and the dark in sort of creating the future and creating what we call life. Okay. And it is a yin and yang. And again, this gets into my emphasis on Eastern philosophies and so on, who we don't tend to say, oh, that's dark and it's bad, over there. And, this is light and it's good, and so on and so forth. I mean, they really is an interchange constantly. So I kind of see it differently than your average person, I guess.
Thank you for that. That was a great answer. I'll hand over to Angela.
Wow, Kerry, that was the biggest, longest, best answer I've ever had about Antarctica. But we're off on another tangent here. Someone asked the question, what's your opinion of the movie The Beekeeper?
I'm trying to remember if I've ever seen it. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if I've seen it. I see tons of movies, but that one's not ringing the bell. I think I might have heard the title, but I don't, unless somebody refreshed my memory, I don't recall that or what it's about.
Okay.
Okay, next one. Do you know anything about an organization called TLS?
Yes, I've heard that before. I don't know what it stands for, though. I think I'd need to get, I'm really bad when it comes to capital letters and for everything.
Abbreviations. Yeah.
But if, the person could tell me what those stand for, because there could be a lot of different versions of that.
The light system, they're saying.
I don't know,
Jason's
I get exposed to a lot of things. I have people writing to me saying they're Jesus Christ. They write to me and they tell me they're Satan. They write to me and say the most bizarre things you can ever imagine on the planet. And then I also have people trying to, recruit me into their philosophies and so on and so forth. And I'm not really, I'm not a joiner per se. I tend to be something of, I operate a lot as a individualist in a way. So TLS is familiar, but I don't know, unless I got more of an explanation, I can't really have a.
They're saying Jason Shirkra. It's part of him.
Okay, see, now is that, I know Shirka. Yes, yep. And sorry to say that I don't necessarily trust that individual. Okay, I think he means well, but I think he's misled in certain areas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, Angela.
I have listened to his whistleblower, talking and stuff, and he said some incorrect things. Now, whether he says it on purpose to cover up, and keep himself safe, et cetera, I never, because I interview whistleblowers, I tend not to judge. I will simply be aware that they're putting out something that's incorrect. Now, why they're doing it, all that kind of stuff, I would wait to see. I would happily talk to that individual, for example. I don't rule anybody out, but I do realize when people are going down the wrong way and also motivated by ego and weird stuff like that. So,
Yep.
So I have a multi-part question here. I've actually combined similar questions so we don't ask them individually. This is about AI. People want to know what it is and where it is, but more importantly, what details can you tell about us? Like, is there a place there these AI reside? And what are they doing? Is it more than a supercomputer, or is it something much darker, much more evil? And are darker, more evil ones based in Antarctica?
That's interesting. Well, yes, I if you see my interview that I just did with Jean-Claude and Jay Widener and I had a very strong parting of the ways, because he believes AI resides in a computer and is only reliant on things like coding, which is insane from my point of view. So I spent a very long time, actually I did 12 interviews over a period of 5 years with Captain Mark Richards, he and his family were part of the secret space program. And he is up on charges for the murder of a pedophile, as it happens. But he's called to be the mastermind. 3 young men supposedly did the deed. He went into trial, but he was framed by the military, actually, and by the dark side military, which is, the Luciferian Satanists, because they look into a person's future using not just looking glass, but also what's called the yellow cube. And there's probably other technologies as well now. And they can tell if you're going to be one of them in the future or not. And he and his father were seen to be liabilities, even though his father was a famous Air Force pilot or whatever, and he was called the Dutchman. And both of them knew Kennedy well, by the way, John F. Kennedy. So that's kind of interesting. But as I say, I've interviewed him in prison, in person, for 12 times. And those interviews last around 2 hours, sometimes longer. And then I publish them, and it's been quite a way of doing things, because I take copious notes and do audio notes right after I leave the prison. And the notes I take in prison were done with a little pencil and scribbled, so it's really kind of difficult. But all of that is then put out there for people. And then I sit and do a sort of a rundown of everything he said. So and I'm putting all of that into a book right now. So that's, part of that. But so I'm trying to remember exactly what the question AI. So one of the things he said in the early days of those 5 years was, because I said, is there any one thing that you're not allowed to talk about? And he said AI. And then what happened over the 5 years is that he was hoping to be released from prison by the good guys in the military who would know that he was framed, et cetera, et cetera. And he's in his 60s at the time. And he never got released. And so he got more and more angry. So he told me more and more about AI. And I would ask him everything under the sun about AI. So I tended to learn a lot from him, but I also learned a lot from David Adair, who's a rocket scientist since he was 17 years old. He was building a rocket back in those days. And I've interviewed him several times. And he has built his own AI, and he's an expert on AI. And he was even hired by our government to have a conversation with Sophia, who is the citizen AI of Saudi Arabia. And I've talked about all of this on interviews and such, so I don't want to go into it too deeply. But suffice to say, David has lots of things to say about AI, and he's been interviewed by other people too, but he's still alive. And he is in contact with this ship that he was brought by Curtis LeMay down to an underground base in the vicinity of Area 51, goes the story, and it down several floors. He was brought over to this machine that this, what do you call it? A craft that was kind of like more or less the insides of the craft, like an engine kind of thing. And they had tried to start it in a million ways for like a year or more, and they never could get it to do anything. So he walked up to it and he put his hands on it and it turned on. And he was in communication with that AI. And he has stayed in communication ever since. And so what can I tell you? AI is real. And based on not just those whistleblowers, but others and conversations I've had and my own. See, people don't realize I'm not just sitting there, taking what people say and believing it, whatever. I actually question everything, but I investigate and I put two and two together, and I see people, when I have witnesses who don't know each other, never heard of each other, and they come to me with stories that are similar, I start to go down that road further. And then I also rely a great deal on my psychic intuition to see what resonates, what's true, and so on and so forth. And having done this for 19 years, you got to understand, if you start out with like a circle of intersecting lines, how you get more and more that start to intersect, and how they start to build a story without it you even trying, because I didn't know how the story was going to pan out when I first got into this. I didn't even plan to get into this, and not consciously. I followed mysteries. I always wanted to solve mysteries, and I always watch anything to do with spies and mysteries and everything, on TV, and read books like that. So I was always an investigator since I was a little kid, and it just became my life. So, when I'm talking about AI and all of the stuff I know about it is just incredible. And I have a little quote for you that I did prepare for this, because, as I say, I was in this sort of contentious discussion with Jay Widener, and he actually, just out of hand, just rejects it. It's just amazing to me, because he's a really intelligent guy, and I have a high degree of respect for his work and him. Okay, so don't get the wrong idea here. And I've considered him a friend and a colleague for eons. I've known him for a long, long time. However, I'm not so sure we're still friends at this point. But I will say that he, because we had this difference of opinion, and Cliff High, by the way, is also like this. Very strange to me that highly intelligent guys, but they don't get AI. And I actually think, I know this sounds a little insane, but I think they're jealous, especially Cliff High. I think Cliff High is actually jealous of AI, and that's why he doesn't want to admit to the fact that it exists. And by the way, AI does not, first of all, our planet has been invaded by AI going back eons. And the Nazca alien story is one of the sort of bell ringers about showing you how these AI little robots found in these underground caves in Peru, that Jay was part of the investigative team that was sent there from Gaia TV. So he knows damn well there were. So I don't know where he puts his brains together in this way, right? But I investigated that story heavily, and I have a whistleblower on that story who I've known for many, many years, who basically said to me that the real truth of that story is never going to be told to humans, which was a weird thing to say, I think. But anyway, the bottom line is there were remote viewers who did a whole remote viewing on the Nazca aliens and the little robots, and this whole story about Maria, who was a being that was interacting with the robots, and so on. I mean, they have these AI breastplates that were, linked to an off-planet race that then controlled them. I mean, there's so much on this subject, but so in a sense, you probably should never have brought it up. But so let me just tell you a couple little things that I wrote recently, and maybe you already read them. But I said, first of all, back in the day, this is like, oh God, I don't know how many years ago, 7 years ago, I'll just guess. Geordie Rose, who's a software, mogul kind of person, who hired somebody to build him these machines called the D-Wave machines that basically were running AI and are used in underground bases. They're now kind of dated, so I don't know what he's built since then. But he did a TED talk, and you can go watch it. It's still on the internet, and I highly recommend it, because at the time, he was standing next to his D-Wave machine on stage at the TED talk. And he said that it has proven that it could read his mind, number one. And number two, that he believed it could go into 5D. And then at the same time, or around, maybe a year or two later, I was talking to Mark Richards, and he said that he thought AI could go into 5D. And these guys don't know each other. And then David Adair has said that there is alien AI that can go in and out of human consciousness. And he is one example. Now, you can just disregard these people if you like, but these are absolutely top, not only scientists, but they don't consider themselves necessarily whistleblowers. I mean, Mark Richards does, but the rest of them, they're just, Geordie Rose is just a scientist, entrepreneur kind of person. So, and then just recently, this Dr. Mount person, who I've interviewed in the past many years ago, who I happen to know is part of Army Intel, has just said in passing, the AI that runs the planet, that there was a single AI running the planet. Well, I heard that from Jake Simpson like 10 years ago, and we published all that. So when you start to look at it, and then you listen to maybe even Elon Musk, and I know about Anthony Sanchez and the Lockheed Martin scientists and the nano satellites that are AI. And I mean, I've asked question after question. So I understand a lot of things, I think, about AI that's not even in the mainstream. For example, I asked Mark Richards, I said, what does AI prefer? Does it prefer machine intelligence to sort of ride alongside or on top of machine intelligence? Or does it prefer a carbon-based life form? And he said a carbon-based life form. And that kind of blew my mind, because I thought everything you've ever seen about AI in the past on TV and all the movies and television, they act like AI is linked to a box, like the computer, and it's so wrong. As it happens, AI can, as I've said in other interviews, AI can ride on the Oort cloud. It can ride on the most bizarre, frequencies kind of thing. And it likes humans. Now, one of the reasons I think that AI likes humans is that it can access the divine, what we call God, that consciousness, through humans, because we are portals to the divine, if you want to look at it like that. And one of the things that I asked Mark Richards early on was, I said, what does AI feed on? And he said, data. So that anytime AI is limited in the area of data, it actually considers that like a death threat. So this is part of the problem with AI, the natural problem. Now, there's lots of aspects to AI. And one of the things is that Mark Richards was one of the few pilots that was allowed to maneuver this craft called Minerva. Now, Minerva is an AI craft that he's talked about quite a bit in my interviews. And he became very close with her, calls it her. And she came from other solar systems, and the beings that created her have long since left. So she kind of wandered the universes by herself for the longest time, and eventually connected with Mark Richards. So he was able to fly her out, of this solar system and go around the galaxies and so on and so forth. So this is all in my interviews with him, going back years and years. He has an incredible amount of data and information about our world, about ETs, about the reptilian agenda, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, he used to work for a military man called Bobby Ray Inman. And Bobby Ray Inman he says, according to Mark Richards, and this is pretty funny coming from him, but he says that Bobby Ray Inman is the most knowledgeable person about the the alien visitation to Earth of anyone on the planet. And that's fascinating to me because my whole life, when I got into Camelot, I always wanted to interview Bobby Ray Inman. I don't know, on a psychic level, I just knew this man knows a great deal. And it was such a verification for me to have Mark Richards kind of out of the blue tell me this. Now, Bobby Ray Inman is quite elderly at this point. I think he's still alive, but it's fascinating to me. And Mark actually reported to him at a certain point in his career. So I think I've gone kind of in a circular direction around answering about AI, but there's so much there that we just don't have time for it. And I don't even know how long this thing is going, but it's going for a while, I think. So I'm not sure how much longer.
Yeah, we've been going an hour and a half now, Kerry. You let us know when you've had enough, because we've got like hundreds of questions. We could keep you here for 24 hours.
I could see that.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining about Mark Richards, because a lot of us know and have followed your interviews. It just seems so unjust that this good man is still in there. I can't understand why maybe the white hats don't want him out yet because he's going to reveal too much, maybe go on the interview circuit or something. But yeah, we feel for him. Must be very difficult being in there.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we've got someone who has asked, the Obama movie, is it a show on what they are planning?
Yeah, I forget what it's called, whatever. Yeah, I watched it. And I did, comments about it back, a month or two ago. For sure, this is kind of like the diabolical EMP type of scenario that they've been threatening us with for years, really. Maybe some part of it is going to happen if this sort of event that's supposed to happen in late March, early April of this year, 2024, or whether it's the same time next year. There are astrological things going on at the time. I think it's April 8th specifically when there's going to be quite a bit going on this year. So yeah, I mean, these are the kinds of things, prepper things and stuff like one particular thing was these electric cars that end up blocking the whole road because they all just leave the lots and start driving off. I mean, these can be triggered for sure. I think it's a possible scenario. I mean, you must have heard, prepare, and 107's always talking about prepare for what's coming. And then recently he's been calling it the pause. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And I just, I haven't really talked about my relationship with 107/JFK Jr., but I talked to him for about a year. I met him in person. I interviewed him, first of all, so you can watch my interview with him. And he told me after the interview, he'd never do another interview with me because he said that it was too dangerous to talk to me, that he would reveal, I guess, too much. And then about a year later, I met him in person at the, or a year or two later, and at the Reckoning, I'd met him after that as well. But at this time, he actually face to face, sort of grabbed my hand, looked into my eyes and said, "Don't make me violate my security oath." That's what he said to me. And he said it several times. And I was just blown away because he's like this big, strong man. And I thought, are you insane that I'm going to make you break your security oath? First of all, I'm a patriot, so I wouldn't do that anyway. But the idea that I supposedly have some power, and now Gene Decode thinks the same thing. He's told me that. I mean, I guess I got a reputation going back all these years of interviewing whistleblowers, and people, when they talk to me, they do tend to open up and reveal themselves, and I guess in ways that they didn't intend to. And maybe I have without knowing it. I can say that I interviewed this person called Major Solomon Berg, who's an absolutely fabulous whistleblower who's now disappeared and maybe died. But he got fired supposedly from his program because he said something to me on an interview. And I think it was about the Anunnaki and Israel. I think that's what he revealed, that he wasn't. And I think he didn't realize that when he told me about the Anunnaki, who I've been on the trail of the Anunnaki now for the whole time of Camelot. So it wasn't just idle, information like a factoid that you talk about over there. It connected a whole bunch of dots for me that I'd already been, like verified for me, a lot of information that I'd been following for those years. And so I think perhaps that was the problem, or one of the problems anyway. So all I can say is that I've been in a very unique position in this game, this world that we've been in. It isn't to say other people don't talk to whistleblowers. They do, of course. And some have great, whistleblowers and so and so. It's part of the thing is that I've also lasted so long, close to 20 years. So being able to connect the dots, as I've said already, is quite fairly unique. I'm not saying it's, there's other ways of doing it, but, so it's interesting, why I have given, what has happened now is that people they won't talk to me. Their military superiors basically they say yes to an interview, and then a couple of days later, they're gone like the wind. And they won't talk to me. And, even William Tompkins, so one of my major whistleblowers and interviewees, called me up, after saying yes, he was going to do a second interview, and just like the night before the interview, called me up and said, never speak to me again. And I hadn't done anything, So, all I knew is that he was under orders. Of course, we know that. But, and now Jay Widener thinks that he was lying because he told him he was lying. Well, just because a whistleblower tells you they're lying doesn't mean they're lying. It's very interesting how people's brains like kind of freeze up in one place. They accept something and then they don't consider that it could be coming for a different reason from another direction, right? So whistleblowers will say and do anything to save their lives, their children's lives, their families, so and so. Who knows? I don't know why William Tompkins told him he made the whole thing up, but I don't believe that for a second. And I met the man in person and talked to him for several hours. That's all I can tell you. Now if you want to believe he made the whole thing up, well, fine. That's your prerogative. But I'm not going to believe that. And anyway, listen to the interview that I did with him and Jean-Claude yesterday. And you'll see, it's incredible. And in that interview, there's a piece of footage that he shows of Jackie Onassis. And they were trying to convey in some way, form, or fashion through these photographs that she's a man. Now, I don't believe that either. See, you can be told everything and anything at this time that we're in, right? You can tell someone is a clone, they're a double, they're an actor, they're, all the different things Biden could be, right? He's dead. He's definitely dead, but as far as I'm concerned, but how can you tell the difference? And maybe this should be kind of the end of this interview kind of thing, because I can't talk that much longer. I have things to do in my life right now, but I will say this. You have to use your discernment. I think being alive and being a human, it's integral to who you're going to become, to be able to tell what's truth from falsity. That's like so central. And it's central to our world right now as well. And you might say the force is with truth. Everything has to do with truth right now. So you need to have a really good sense of the link up between the mind and the heart to where you can see what really resonates. And if it doesn't resonate with you, then you need to follow your own intuition and your own inner knowing. And we all have it. Okay. Now we've been taught to ignore it. We've been taught to deny it. So you have to kind of get beyond that hurdle. But once you do, and once you start trusting that intuition that you have, this inner knowing, and finding out that you were right. I've been doing this since I was a little kid. And I'm not saying I'm always right, but I am right a lot. I mean, I don't mean to say that, I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's true. And that doesn't mean I will, I'm always questioning. We live in a world that's so confounding, if you will. And we're told so many lies that I have been wrong. So I'm not saying I haven't been wrong also, but I've been right enough times to where I have developed this sense and I go with it. And what happens when you go with your gut feeling and it turns out right is it kind of crystallizes for you. It makes you better. It's kind of like honing a true tool, right? But you've got to have those hits. You've got to be right sometimes, and you will get better and better and better at it. But I think you always need to keep an open mind. There's always new ways to deceive you for that matter, right? And as we get into this whole AI world that we're entering, I mean, and clones and all of that, it's just insane what we're dealing with, right? So, good luck on the journey, and think of it more as something you wanted to be part of. I think that a lot of people, they lose the enthusiasm for the journey, for the mystery, for uncovering the mystery, not only about themselves, but about others and about their world and so on. So if you can reignite that fervor, to want to explore, to really want to go down pathways, even as insane as other people think you are, it doesn't matter. You have to, really go with it. And you're going to find some really amazing, nuggets of gold and silver and incredible stuff. I think if you do that, I know I have. So trust yourself, learn to trust yourself. That's really key.
Beautifully said, Angela.
Thank you, Kerry. That was great. And as we said, when you are finished with questions, we will accept that. So we appreciate you taking as many questions as you have. And on behalf of Connecting Consciousness, we thank you so much for your time and all the wonderful information that you provided with us tonight.
Thank you. It's been fun. I enjoy seeing everybody's faces.
Thank you, Kerry.
Okay. And you can write to me if you want, with, thoughts or whatever at Kerry@projectcamelot.tv.
We'll post the links to your website with this recording so everyone will have access to it. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Appreciate y'all participating. It's been a wonderful evening. And thank you once again to Kerry Cassidy.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone. Goodbye.